really wanted people to know who he was. And one way of doing that was by being extreme. Generally speaking, pushed all the boundaries of what one would think was fashion into a completely different dimension.
You know, his whole life really was entertainment. If you see someone walking down the road dressed as a birthday cake, you're going to mention it to your friends, aren't you?
It was Lee that really kind of led the way, you know, with his looks, and I think that he was such an inspiration to people there, and they thought, you know, he looks like that, well, you know, I'm going to do my own thing.
If he'd done a performance, I would always go up and say it was really good, and Lee would always go, oh, thank you, Boy George, I really value your opinion, and then walk off. And you were never quite sure if he was sort of taking the piss out of you or actually he meant it.
I think he was jealous of George as well, very jealous, because he was famous in the way that Lee would like to be.
And he had to make a few clothes for George, and he used to get so excited when he was coming around the house, going, oh, I can't believe it, Boy George came to my house. But of course, when George came round, he'd act really cool and pretend it was everyday occurrence.
When Lee made a costume for George, he would try to make him look as large as possible. I don't think George actually clocked onto it. He would kind of like pad out things and emphasise parts of the body that he knew that George wanted actually to be covered up.
The thing is, I knew that he'd made the clothes to make me look fatter, and I'd said to people, he's made these deliberately to make me look bigger.
It was like Lee's way of getting back at George for whatever crime George did, but I don't know what crime he did, being more famous than him. He got to really love his body, but I think it took him quite a long time, because when I've read his early diaries when he first moved to London from Australia, he was constantly on these diets.
Just to see this guy, you know, kind of out, you know, sort of, you know, with sort of belts around his belly to make it look bigger, and, you know, just, I found him physically brave.
He realised that actually he could manipulate his body quite nicely with various fashions and flatter himself more in that way.
And by the end, when he started getting dressed up so freaky, I couldn't bear going out with him, because it was like you couldn't even have a conversation, because he had a great big thing on his head. I don't like that. I like to go and have a nice chat.
I have a very strong belief in myself and in the sort of truth of my vision and being true to myself, and that sort of sustains me through some tricky patches.
George, Marilyn and I were like the carry-on end of the market. Do you know what I mean? It was like all kind of, you know, the one-liners and, you know, just coming out with things. And Lee Barrett was more like, I would never speak to anybody that wasn't dressed up.
My thing with Lee was just, felt very real.
Different people have played played Lee, and some are better than others.
The power of shocking people is something I'm not a stranger to.
He would be very, very amused to know that George was playing him.
Chris Renshaw, the director, kept saying to me, you could play Lee, and I was like, oh, you know, I mean, just the idea of, you know, I mean, singing on stage is one thing, I have no kind of fear about that, but to actually act, the thought of it really terrified me. I just thought, oh, I can't do it. And then, like most things in my life, I kind of say no, and then I sort of thought, well, actually, why not?
He really does throw himself into the role, and I think really focuses on the sort of really outrageous, intimidating side of Lee that you would see in the nightclubs. Basically, that's what most people saw of Lee. Didn't see him behind the scenes.
I've stuck to this sort of like the original Lee Barry designs for all the other people that play Lee Barry, you know, like the stand-ins and things like that, because they're comfortable within that realm as well. But with George, yes, it's sort of like it grew because I think both of us felt that it would have done if Lee had been actually there.
For me, it's been quite physically liberating, and it's also sort of got me back into kind of wearing more makeup. I think that's the funny bit of it, because it's like, you know, I mean, normal drag anyway, you change. You know, when I dress up normally, I change because you sort of become the persona that people expect you to be. I think dressed as Lee, you become even more horrible, you know, and I don't seem to mind kind of telling people to fuck off when I dress like this.
To keep it in the sort of like the true tradition of Lee Barry, it was good that it kind of like had a life, it was still growing and it's still in involvement and stuff like that, because he never did the same look more than once, really. You know, if he did, you know, it was a bad day for him.
Tonight, and one night only, we're going to the heart of London's art world, where my dear friend Lee Barry is appearing as an art exhibit. Thank you.
I wanted the songs to be self-contained, you know, like things like Ich bin Kunst, you know, which in a way kind of sums up Lee without having to go into the whole, you know, the whole story about him coming to London and working in Burger King, which is originally what we did in the script.
Don't you see? Look at you! There! Look at me! I am art!
I decided that really the interesting thing about Lee was how fantastic he looked, and that was, who cares what he looked like before, you know. So in writing that song we kind of managed to encapsulate that whole kind of journey of Lee's from Australia and, you know, the impending madness that he wreaked on London nightlife.
Meanwhile, in a dark recess, look!
There's a scene in Taboo where Lee's in a cottage. I mean, his first scene, he's in the toilet. It's quite true.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the biggest freak of all? I've had a man or two, in fact I've had a few, in dark and dingy places.
The whole kind of triumph of having a man or two in dark and dingy places, I understand that, the value of that in terms of living in the moment.
And I never asked their names. Hungry faces in the dark, dirty deeds in the park. And before you ask, I feel no shame.
So, you know, his sex life was strangers he met in toilets.
He was a fan of all cottages. In fact, he could have written a book on them, I think, because he seemed to know the best ones.
Well, I was rimmed recently in the public lavatories here, and that was so special for me because I don't usually have sexual contact because of the way I look. People are kind of slightly horrified about my appearance, and they don't want to have sort of intimate contact with me. But somebody, I don't know, maybe they mistook me for a lavatory.
We had plenty of sex, but not much romance.
Hello, Philip! Still living in the past.
Hello, Lee. Still cursing the milk of human kindness.
I do so admire how you manage all those stairs at your age, dear. And how you make a classical look seem, well, far from fresh.
Silence, fool. You're consuming my oxygen.
Lee did not like Philip Zalon at all. No idea why he hated him so much. I think the feeling was quite mutual. I don't think Philip liked him particularly either.
He started being insulting to me. He used to come out with these just really naff things. I can't remember what he used to say, but when I used to see him, I just used to come up to him and go, "You're a fat, ugly bastard." And he used to go, "Oh, I like that. Very nice." You know, which kind of was the right thing for him to say, actually. He knew all the right triggers to press to annoy me.
Philip's son had always been, "Why is he so mean to me?" And I just, all I could do was pat him on the back.
In those days, you could press a number and make your own phone ring. So you used to do that all the time when you were there and have these long conversations with mystery people, and you think that, and then they go, "Oh, that was Steve Strange, actually. Oh, yeah, that was Boy George ringing me." And all these people, and it was just him talking to himself.
Hang up! Towel! And dry. Gently, gently, you know, delicate my skin is.
Gently.
Every crack, indent, and hidden recess, bar now. Stop fingering me, see? Oh, you do have the touch, though.
Oh, thank you, Lee. I do try my best.
When the script was initially being written, it was quite important that I wasn't portrayed as one of his slaves. It was apparently